So Duduzane Zuma was not at today's hearing, but his interests were forwarded by his lawyer. How so?
Well, his advocate, Pete Lowe, senior counsel, really put forward Duduzane Zuma's version of this meeting of the 23rd of October 2015. And in fact, the introduction mentions there Jonas claiming he met with the Gupta family, and that's correct. That's what he said in his statement initially to the public protector, a statement he didn't sign, that was the point of much contention today. But he later stipulated that it was a Gupta brother. There was confusion over which Gupta brother it was, but he's insistent there was a Gupta brother present at the Saxonwold aspect of that meeting, and he claims that person offered him a financial minister position. But we do know that Duduzane Zuma will be at the commission. When remains a mystery. Let's have a look.
In order to determine whether there is objective evidence one way or the other, then that should be done. So these are not adversarial proceedings. And I'm not here simply to meet a case and so forth. Because Mr. Zuma will testify. And he will testify completely differently to what Mr. Jonas has testified. As a matter of fairness, perhaps, the cross-examination should deal with some of what we see to be glaring inconsistencies and contradictions and issues of credibility. And to fit all of that into a half-an-hour package will be difficult, which means that if at the end of all of this we do not succeed in, for purposes of fairness, showing Mr. Jonas what all the issues are that we believe count against his version, then perhaps another plan should be made, and perhaps we should be allowed to present you with a list, perhaps, of contradictions and so forth, to be looked at in your own good time.
So Jonas also mentioning former President Jacob Zuma again.
Yes, and here he actually gave some advice to Chairperson Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, advising what Zondo should consider when he makes his recommendations in his final report, and talking broadly about the climate of politics in South Africa and the blur between the ANC and governing party or a national government. So this is what he had to say on the former president.
You're going to have a problem where capturing the party is the easy vehicle of capturing the state. Because the relationship between the party and the state is so, there's no kind of lines that are as strong as you would want to have. So again, part of, I think, again, I'm being upfront, part of the things that I think as we think constructively about this is actually to revisit our political system, particularly how do we draw a wall between the political party and the state? And how do we build institutions of the state that go beyond political cycles, like election cycles, for instance, and so on and so on. And there's a clear example. Institutions in South Africa that have survived, it's because they are not linked to political cycles. The judiciary survives. It survives simply because it's not, when you have a new president, you don't jump and fire all judges. We have in South Africa an over-personalized political system. Our politics are so over-personalized that we hardly talk structural issues. That's why we can't resolve these issues of racism. Is nice if it's said by Mcebisi, Jonas, or somebody else. If somebody else says racist remarks, we tolerate because of the personality. But even our political cycles, we kind of, and that's why I think the danger, I would still argue, with the process of state capture is, can I use the term to over-Zumanize it? To think that it was about Zuma. That would be a biggest mistake. Because it is bigger, it is structural, it is systemic. Because you will miss the point, if you do that.
He just coined a new term there, didn't he? Zumanize.
Yeah, anyway, we can add it to our lexicon.
We can, yeah. Let's talk about this. Jonas also had to answer for his actions for the 23rd of October 2015. Remind us of that day.
Yes, so this is the day he says that he met with Duduzane Zuma at the Hyatt Hotel in Rosebank, Johannesburg, and from there they then travelled to an undisclosed, on Jonas's version, destination to meet with undisclosed people. And that was where a low for Duduzane Zuma really grilled him on why would he, as Deputy Finance Minister, with bodyguards and transport with him at the hotel, go to this undisclosed location to meet undisclosed people? Wasn't that a little naive? And this is what Jonas had to say.
You then decide, Mr. Jonas, to leave with Mr. Zuma to a place you did not know for a purpose you did not know. Is that correct?
Yes, I did.
And you left your protectors behind.
Yeah, I did.
And your vehicle.
I did. Again, I mean, when he said to me, when we had a preliminary discussion, and in that conversation it was about his father and what his father thinks about me, and I outlined that. And after that discussion, he then says, listen, we can't meet here, and we have to meet elsewhere. In any case, I would want other people to join us. I said, of course, let's do that.
Thank you.
I asked him how far, because I'm rushing to the airport, that was the time. And he said, no, it's not far, it's just around the corner. I said, okay.
So did you ask who are the other people we're going to meet?
I didn't ask. I mean, I really didn't have any reason to assume that there was something funny or bad that was about to happen.
But Mr. Zuma's name and the Gupta's name had been linked. If we look at this statement and all the other statements, it's always the two of them together when Mr. Hlongwane talks to you about these matters.
I can put it differently. The president's son says he wants to talk to me. I will go and listen to him. Whether I would do what he says I must do, it's another story. I will go and listen to him. I will not even interrogate him about what the meeting is about.
Mr. Jonas, you're a deputy minister. You leave your protectors behind, your vehicle behind. You get into a car with a man you had just met a few minutes ago to go to a meeting where you don't know where the location is, to talk about things you have no idea what it's going to be, and to meet unknown people. Is that your evidence?
That's what I'm saying. I do travel alone most of the time, by the way.
Yes. Right.
And I did.
So the one thing that we've seen is that Mcebisi, Jonas and Feki Mentor confuse the Gupta brothers. That's the one thing we're seeing emerge in the state capture inquiry. I could tell them apart.
Yes, you probably could if you saw RJ and Artul next to each other, because those are the two sort of public-facing Gupta brothers. And Feki Mentor actually described her system of trying to differentiate them based on their build, you could say. She used more sort of crass language, but never mind. And Rajesh Tony Gupta is the least publicly known of the three Gupta brothers. But a little sort of crib note or kind of trick that I've devised to try and distinguish them is that Artul Gupta normally has a moustache and the most pointy of noses of the three brothers. So that's a more discreet way of trying to distinguish them than maybe their build or obesity, as Feki Mentor said.
Okay, Aaron, I think you should advise some of these people about how to look out for the Gupta brothers. Let's talk about Fana Hlongwane's lawyers. They didn't pitch. I mean, they had a chance to cross-examine and then they weren't there. Yeah,
there was a no-show from both Fana Hlongwane and his lawyers. And Advocate Philip Mokoena, senior counsel for the inquiry's legal team, saying to the chairperson, we sent these emails, we gave notice of the date of 15th of March once it had been changed, and they haven't pitched. But Zondo questioning whether maybe that message had become lost en route and asking for them to get to the bottom of how that message was actually conveyed to Hlongwane's counsel.
Yeah, and then Jacob Zuma, of course, hasn't responded to letters from the Commission saying that he has been implicated, and obviously they want to know whether he's going to want to come to cross-examine as well at the Commission.
Yes, and that's where it gets interesting to hear from Lo that Duduzane Zuma will be giving evidence. And of course, in order to apply and be granted cross-examination rights against Mcebisi Jonas, there was this quid pro quo that Duduzane Zuma would also then be subject to cross-examination. But he will first give evidence. And interesting that the son is coming forward to give evidence at the inquiry at an undisclosed date. But as yet, we have no indication on whether the father will. But we, of course, know that former President Jacob Zuma has time and again questioned this notion of state capture, whether in fact it does exist and whether in fact it ever took place in South Africa.
Even though he technically set up the State Capture Commission.
He did sign it off right before he was weeded out of government, you could say, and probably under much duress, because if you look at the timeline of litigation between him and the public protector and the gross legal fees that were involved in that, it's clear that he wasn't very keen on her recommendation that this inquiry be set up to begin with.
So what are we expecting next week?
Well, you know, we've just had this huge chapter on Eskom. We had few little deviations here and there, learning, for example, that Des van Rooyen, the former finance minister of all but a weekend, is going to cross-examine Lungisa Fuzile of National Treasury, the former Director General. So that was a deviation on the Eskom evidence. That's been all tied up for now. Some really interesting revelations coming out of that about how Eskom lobbied for Tegeta to gain this very lucrative Optimum coal mine, in which our current president actually had a stake at one point before he returned returned to politics, and he distanced himself from Shanduka, which was a minority shareholder in Optimum when it was still under Glencore. But back to your question about next week. So we've done with Eskom, and now we're going to move on to Denel. So serious concerns again over a state-owned entity, malfeasance and cutting red tape in order to beneficiate people close to those in political power.
All right, thanks so much for that, Erin. Appreciate it. That's our reporter, Erin Bates, tracking the state capture inquiry for us.